Okay, so we have signal coming from Pro Tools. It's just a 20-second loop of some orchestral recordings, and we have that being output via Pro Tools on output 1 and output 2, which correspond to the Orion line output 1 and output 2. And on our patch bay, line output 1 and 2 of the Orion are normal to line input 1 and 2 on the Toft. So the very first thing we need to do in order to get signal into the Toft board via line input is to go to the top input section of the desk with these purple knobs on the top. So the purple knobs are your gain and your trim, so that's how much signal you're bringing into the console, okay? And there's also a gray button right to the bottom right of that knob that indicates whether or not you are receiving signal from the mic input or the line input. And in this case, we are receiving from the line input. So we're going to want to make sure that the line input buttons are depressed, meaning those channels are going to receive line input from the Orion in this case. So the next thing we need to do is see whether or not we have an adequate signal coming into the board. Now, unfortunately, one of the design quirks of this console is that the meter bridge here only reflects signal coming into the channel post fader, which means we actually have to turn our faders up in order to see the signal coming into the console. Now in this particular case, I'm turning these faders up to unity or to 0 so that I'm not manipulating the signal more with the fader, and it's really just passing through, so I can get a really good idea of the input or output volume of that material. You'll notice if I bring it down -10 on the fader, then I'm actually reducing the signal by 10 dB on the console. And I don't want to do that. I just want to know how much signal we have coming into the console pre-fader. But because the meter bridge is post-fader, I'm putting it at 0. So I'm just going to match these, and I'm just looking at, a level that's not terribly high, but a healthy level. I'm not at -20, but I'm not at +15 either. So at this point, we have signal coming into the console, but we still don't hear anything. So if we want to hear it through our system, we have to assign these two channels to go somewhere. Now the assignment buttons on the bottom next to the faders determine where that signal is going to go. There's 5 buttons, and it determines whether or not it's going to go to your left-right fader, which is your master fader on the very right-hand side of the console. It's blue. Or if it's going to go to groups 1 and 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, or 7 and 8. And then obviously, after we assign it, we can pan it accordingly, because in this particular case, we have a left signal.
Can you assign it to multiple destinations
Absolutely,
at the same time?
absolutely. So you can definitely assign it to multiple destinations at the same time. And there are some complex routing and processing tasks that you can do, like parallel compression, or you can process things differently by using a group insert, using some of the hardware we have over here, where maybe you send a kick and a snare to groups 1 and 2, and then you compress those, as well as sending it to left-right uncompressed, which would give you a combination of compressed and uncompressed, provided that you assign groups 1 and 2 also to the master fader.
Gotcha.
And that would be called, New York style compression or parallel compression. So you have the signal coming in. Let's assign it. So we'll assign it to the left-right, and then it'll pass over to our master. Our master's up at 0, and now we can turn our remote up in the studio in order to get sound out of our monitors. So some additional features here would include phantom power on the top in our head amp section. We have phantom power for using condenser microphones. Obviously we don't need to turn that on right now. We're not using microphones. There's a polarity inversion button. So if you want to invert the polarity, you know, for instance, maybe if you have like a snare top and a snare bottom and you want to invert the polarity on something.
So they're not out of phase with each other.
Out of polarity or out of 180 degrees out of phase.
Right.
Right,
Okay.
yeah. And then at the bottom we mentioned we can put some panning in place.